Welcome to this edition of Compassionate Conversations. My name is Lynn Flanagan, and I'm the CEO at Hospice of Rockingham County. Compassionate Conversations is one more way that Hospice of Rockingham County strives to connect with, care for, and support the community that we serve. Our goal for this space is to provide some education, challenge some misconceptions that might surround end-of-life care, and not shy away from the hard conversations. But we want to do all of that with compassion, dignity, and respect. Joining me today are two of our chaplains here at HRC, Hunter Thompson and Linwood Carver. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we dive in to today's topic, Linwood, what would you like our listeners to know about you?
Well, this is a second career for me, Lynn. Yeah. I worked 38 years in sales and just had a calling for this to be a ministry. I have an earned doctorate degree. I worked, as I said, in sales, and I enjoy this work. It's, as I said, a ministry for me, and I think that helps me get up every morning and come to work and sit with my patients and enjoy just doing this work. So it's important to me that I have a purpose in this world that I live in, and so it's the ministry that I have.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
You know, in words, when you think about calling and having a purpose, I think I speak for all of us when we all come from that place, doing this very important work with a nonprofit hospice and serious illness organization. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what would you like listeners to know about you, Hunter?
Well, first off, chaplains come in all shapes and sizes and backgrounds.
Yeah.
I started out in education and worked at UNC Wilmington for the first part of my career. I left there to build a homeless network for the state of North Carolina, and then I was executive director for a homeless shelter. And while I was there, my life sort of took an arc, and I went into active ministry. I had a couple of churches, and then I wanted to know what I was going to do with the second half of my life. I discerned the calling to be a chaplain, went through a CPE program, which we'll talk about later, in ARMC, and that's where I met this guy.
Yeah.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it because it is a calling, it is a mission, and it's also a daily opportunity to change people's lives. It's a wonderful thing to do.
And isn't that interesting thing to think about when you said change people's lives? I don't know that a lot of times people think about that as we're talking about end-of-life care in a lot of cases, right? But there's so much to be done with the support that we offer that we will get into, but so much of an impact that you all can have on somebody's quality of life. And that's one thing that I constantly want us to be able to educate the community about, that end-of-life care or even our serious illness care, it's not just the physical symptoms that we're talking about, and it's not just physical comfort. So we'll get all in there. I don't want to steal your thunder, but there's just so much there to unpack. Now, I've been a nurse for 33 years and actually started here, of course, as a nurse at the bedside. And this is a misconception, and I think a good place to get us started. I remember clearly so many times I'd go see one of my patients as the hospice nurse, and they would say, well, the hospice preacher's coming by, or the hospice preacher called, or the hospice preacher just left. So let's talk a little bit, what's the difference between a chaplain and a minister or a preacher?
Well, it hasn't changed much, Lynn. We're still called the hospice preacher, the hospice pastor. We're still called that, but we're much more than the preacher and the pastor. We are trained to come into homes in a non-denominational way. We don't come in to evangelize. We come in to support, and we've been trained to do that. You have a preacher who tend to be in a denomination or within a church, but we tend to be within places that are that have a wide variety of people, a diverse diversity of people there that have different denominations, different faiths, different beliefs, and we support them in traumatic ways when they're having trauma. So we're much more than the preacher. But we can be the preacher if that's what that person needs. But we tend to want to be there to support them in many different ways. And I think Hunter does a great job in that as well.
Yeah. So what else would you add to that?
Well, chaplains are a little bit more expansive. Every discipline in the ministry has a role and a purpose. Pastors generally are based to a denomination. They generally are located out of a church or a parish. We're different. We generally operate in a non-denominational way. In this case, we are part of a hospice team, and so our patients, the 100 or so plus patients, come from every walk of life. And so our job is to minister to them equally, regardless of what their faith system is. And so while a pastor might come in and work with a single congregant or church member, we work with everyone. And so I think that's the inherent difference. Linwood touched on it. We go through a year-long residency. There's an internship before that. We both have to have a Master's of Divinity. Linwood and I are very fortunate to have doctorates. So there's a lot of training that goes beyond just general introduction into ministry and pastors. I don't want to say that their role isn't valuable. It is essential.
Yeah.
But what we can do is we can bring a different perspective and also kind of stand in that breach. If the individual doesn't have an active relationship, we can be that spiritual person for them.
So the training is definitely one thing that sets you all apart as far as what makes you different from a minister or a pastor. We talk an awful lot around here thinking about the whole interdisciplinary team. We talk a lot about meeting patients where they are, not where we think somebody should be, or that's not our place, right? So when you say you all work with everybody across the board, that really touches on that. We're in the South, we're in the Bible Belt, but what if somebody doesn't even have a belief system? Where do you all fit, and what does spiritual care, how does that work? Even if somebody says, hey, I don't need you to come, I don't need the hospice preacher to come because I don't believe in God, I'm an atheist, or that's not important for me. Talk about spiritual support even still in that.
So first off, talking about religion is not as important as talking about the human needs. Every human is afraid. Every human gets uncertain. And when you go through such a traumatic experience as hospice, it's generating all of these questions. Who am I? What kind of meaning has my life had? How can I resolve relationships? How can I come to reconciliation, a sense of peace? And all of those things we're trained to deal with, and we never have to use the word religion. We don't ever have to use the word church. We're certainly not there to shame anybody. We don't have an agenda. And so when someone comes to us and say, you know, I just really don't believe, we're like, okay. So let's figure out what we can work on together. And if someone is open to that, I think we can have a great relationship. Linwood's done that with a couple of patients since I've been here.
And the thing is I think we all may not believe in a deity, but I think we all operate in from a spirit. And what we try to do is find that inner things that go on within a person, what we may call spirit. They may call it by a different name, but we call it spirit, and we try to reach those and touch those places that people feel, and those to reach down deep into that person to find out what's going on inside of them, the things that they may have hidden deep into their spirit, and touch on those things that they may want to share, and in their dying wish, if you will. So to be able to do that, a couple of patients that are agnostic or atheists, I have spoken with them, but we don't talk about religion. They talk about themselves. And at some points of time, they start saying, talk about their spirit. And we go from there. So it becomes a spiritual support instead of a religious support. So I think that's one of how I traditionally handle that.
And I love thinking about the human need, because I'm an old psych nurse, so I have always been trained that's the whole person. Again, we're back to hospice end-of-life care is not just about the physical needs, but none of us, you can't just look at us as just the physical being or the mental and emotional being and then the spiritual being. It's all what makes us whole, right? And there are so many needs that I think sometimes people don't even realize they have until they have the opportunity to build a relationship with you all and start doing some of that life review. Now that term, life review, that's something we talk a lot about, and it's something that we know what we're talking about. But if you had never heard that term before, help me, how can we educate the community when you say you're going to help somebody with life review? What does that really mean?
Well, I think when I want to assess a patient, I want them to tell me what's important to them in their life. What things impacted their life, the things that they remember, the things that that they made important in their life, and what challenges that they had in their life, and to be able to share those things with us, because we find out many times that people, those things that are important to them is those things they want to talk about. The impact that they had with their parents, what mama did and made them smile, and what mama did to make them cry. And those things are things that they remember, they want to share with anyone that's willing to listen. And so when we try to facilitate that, find ways to get them to feel free to talk about those things, even those things, Lynn, that may have hurt them. Sometimes they want to share that with us. I often talk with pastors, and they say, I have a pastor and I don't think I need a chaplain. And I would tell them, I say, sometimes we build a lot of times with an image for our pastors, but we're able to come in and we don't have that investment that they have put into the pastor, that they are willing to share with us that they won't share with their pastors or their faith community. And so they'll share those hidden things with us. And many of those things go back to childhood, go back to schools and that type of thing. So we try to facilitate that, to that openness, that non-judgmental openness that they can talk with us about, and that they feel secure that we won't divulge that information to anyone. So we try to do that and facilitate that.
Okay.
In terms of life review, it does cover a big cross-section of what we do. And we're not the only person that hears life review. Social workers are hearing it, nurses are hearing it, everyone on the care team. So I'm very mindful, we're part of a care team, and we're all going to see parts of the individual. And so I think our role, when we do our assessments of what the patient's needs are, and we start that conversation, then we can understand what gives them hope, what gives them purpose, where are the points of dissidence that still need resolution, and how might we, through our discipline and through the other disciplines here at Hospice, how can we address those in a way that starts a healing conversation. And that's sort of what life review does. It takes what a person brings to the table, and then we look at what is healing, what creates wholeness, what builds bridges, so that people can find some sense of peacefulness as they transition. And life review gives us all those clues.
Yeah. And you know, everybody wants to feel that their life has had purpose. And you know, we can't emphasize that enough, that every life is important. So the backgrounds, where we all come from, our experiences are all uniquely ours, but everybody's is important. And to help somebody work through that life review and see what they have been able to contribute to this life. But then the reconciliation piece is just huge. So we're not only working with that patient, you all have the opportunity and the privilege to work with the family as a unit.
Right.
Maybe that's not even blood related family, because we have friends that are family, but whoever is important in this person's life. So talk a little bit about how you do that with families. We've focused on the patient, but what sort of challenges maybe, or where do you go with the families?
Well, I was just thinking about that as Hannah was talking. You know, many times when the patient comes in, they're unresponsive. We are not able to glean information from them. We're not able to do a life review of them, so we have to get it from the family members. And they're giving their perspective of that, of the patient's life, integrated with their life. And so we're hearing also the impact that they are making, that they had from this person's life as well. So many times we are doing the same thing with the caregiver that we would do with the patient. We are listening for those verbal clues and body clues of what is going on with this person. How did we support them in this, and what impact this person had in their life, and how can we give them the additional support that they need, because the caregiver is also going through something as well, and they need our support as well, and at times they needed support more so than the patient. And so we try to facilitate that life review for them. How can we support you in this season, in this journey that this person is a part of your life in? How do we support you as well? So we're trying to do it with everyone that's involved in that circle, and providing that support as well.
I'm always mindful that when I walk into a patient's room and there's family present, there's multiple narratives going on. There's the patient's narrative of their life and how they're interpreting their illness. And then there's the narrative of each person that's there. And that's their perspective of the relationship and what's happening and their emotional needs at the moment. We are trained to make that assessment, to figure out in real time who needs the most energy, where can we make the biggest difference, and then try to figure out as we go on and what work we're going to do with the family and the patient, what is most important. And so we have to really be careful. We call it reflective listening. We have to be very mindful about what we're hearing and responding to in such a way that we can create a care plan that starts to address those issues, so that when we walk out of that room, it's like, wow, that was a great conversation. No, we take that and go, that's a great conversation. Now, how can we build on that? What tools and interventions can we use to help take care of some of the issues that families have? Because trust me, most of the families that we see have some kind of underlying conflict. They either have conflict or they have unmet needs, and either way, as we deal with those things, the patient comes to a greater sense of peace and resolution. So it kind of all works together.
And you know, we don't have a long time to get there, right?
Right.
So I am always amazed at the skills you all do bring to the table and how quickly you can sort through all the stuff and get to where you need to be or what is important to that particular patient and that family to help start working them towards some of the resolution, but all of the support that you all can bring. Now, you mentioned, I'm circling back a little bit, if somebody has a pastor, because you made a very good point, Linwood, that sometimes, especially if somebody's been our minister for a long time, we do tend to sometimes put our own ministers on a pedestal, or maybe there might be something, golly, I would love to talk about so-and-so, but I might not want them to see that part of me or to know about that part of my history. And you all provide such a wonderful, safe space and a place for them to put whatever it is. But how do you partner with somebody's minister if they do have a church family minister and that support in place? So how does that work together?
Well, we have tried to do that consciously, partner with some local churches, with the pastors, by calling them and getting them involved in the care of the patient. We of course ask for permission first if you desire for us to contact the pastor. But we want to get them involved because they are an important part of the care, because they've been many times lifelong spiritual advisors to the patients. And so what I do is try to ask the family, would you like for me to contact your pastor, and try to work out a support schedule where we may go together, or we may ask who wants to go this week, and they provide the rituals that they have been used to providing, and we provide that safe space of listening, just giving them the space to talk, and the pastors understand the role that we're playing is not there to evangelize, not there to circumvent their teaching, but there to provide an extra dimension of space for them to talk and share, and that realize that we're not going to tell them everything that the patient tells us, because that's between them and their creator that they choose to worship. So I try to work with them and have conversation with them, but of course we want to make sure we do it under the guidance of the family and the patient.
Okay.
So in terms of working with clergy, that's always, for me, that's my number one choice. If they're working with clergy, I want to augment what's going on. I want to be an added resource. I want to supplement. I don't think it's healthy for people in hospice to try to replace their spiritual background, their foundation. But what we also see, and I don't mean to be critical, we see a lot of people that are now unchurched because they couldn't go, and they feel like they're not part of the congregation anymore. Pastors don't visit. And, they feel in some ways left behind, and that can create some bitterness. And so I try to work through that to the point where they can go, yeah, I can bring that person back in. Our job is not to be proprietary in our spiritual care. Whenever possible, partnership is what we do. Making the connection with the faith community only helps the patient.
Right.
And so if we can repair a broken relationship so that patient gets more of what they need, then it's a day well done. Yeah.
So, we all know, I don't think we can name anything that COVID did not change, but COVID definitely had an impact on church attendance, and when everything was shut down and we couldn't go, we didn't feel like it was safe to go. So a lot of time went by, and maybe somebody's minister changed, and they haven't been able to build that relationship. So I think you all coming on the scene and with the patient and family's permission inviting that minister in to partner in this care. Plus, I think it's a wonderful way to educate the community through that minister as to what this work is really all about. So certainly not taking the place of, but I would imagine there have been some times too that you all have actually been support for someone's minister. If they have been their minister for years and years, they're going to grieve this loss too.
Exactly.
Has that ever been?
Yes. Let me do add as well, Lynn, that many times the patient family ask us once the patient has transitioned to be a part of the memorial service, because they felt that we were a part of the ministry, and the pastor will ask us as well to become involved in that service as well. But yes, we have been asked that. We've been asked that as well. I've kind of lost that moment, that question that you asked.
So we were talking about supporting somebody else's minister and their pastor.
Yes, many times, the number of times I've had to sit down and talk with the pastor and affirm that they are suffering too, and that they are grieving too, and many times they agree with that and ask for support from our grief support system.
And you know, that's an important point too, that it's no reflection, even if it's somebody's minister, it's no reflection on them to admit that this loss is hard for them too.
Exactly.
Again, we're all back to the human need and our connection to one another and the relationships that we have.
If I could ask one more. We're ordained, so I've baptized a number of people since I've come here. We've done numerous memorial services on behalf of patients and family. I'm prepared to marry people. We can do that. We can provide the full sacrament. For patients that aren't connected to their religious community, this is an incredible value-added service because they long for that craving that they wouldn't have gotten within a congregational support. And so we can actually provide that, taking that pressure off. And so in terms of working with clergy, and this is also we're specialized in this. And some clergy look to us because they don't know quite how to navigate it themselves. If they haven't walked this journey a couple of times, they're still trying to figure out how to adapt their ministry to meet the patient's needs. So that's why our collaboration with local pastors comes on a lot of different levels. And every time it happens, it's better for the patient.
I want to just add to that as well. I have advocated with pastors within my realm of influence that every pastor should maybe take a unit of CPE. Due to CPE helping us with our own struggles, we can sit with our patients and understand what we are dealing with, sitting there with them, that we are not getting into the bed with the patient because we remember something that has happened in our life, that we can deal with that. And many pastors have not gone through that self-realization in themselves. And so many times, the reason they don't go see patients sometimes is because they haven't dealt with some unresolved issue in their life. And we sometimes can help them search out that unresolved things going on in their life to help them to be able to sit and be fully present with patients. Because sometimes when you go into the room, I think Hunter will agree, that you go into a room and you sit there and you're looking at that patient and you're reminded of Mama laying there, you're reminded of Aunt Beulah sitting there, and not that patient with their own unique life, and helping them to be able to hear their needs and hear their felt needs, as well as the family sitting there. You look across the room, you think that person sitting across the room is you. and what your needs are not their needs. And so that unique perspective that CPE gave us, that supervised training of being able to be in a trauma situation and not to feel you there,
Right.
is helpful. And so I continue to advocate that every pastor should at least take one unit to try to understand what they are feeling when they're dealing with their patients.
You know, we talk a lot within our team here about our own self-care for that very reason, because there's no way to be a caring and compassionate human being doing the work that we do. There's no way not to have that connection, not to have some things push. We have emotional buttons too, but that self-awareness, and that's when that training comes into play, so we can always focus on the patient. And you know, you mentioned earlier we have over 100 right now hospice patients, but I think one of the beauties of all of that, and again it goes back to your skills, the skills of the whole team, we cannot provide cookie cutter care is what I would call it. No way.
We shouldn't.
We should not. That's exactly right. That would be a tragedy if we did, because we'd be cheating people.
Absolutely.
So, you know, that's just something else I want to emphasize is with your training and the support that you all can provide to patients and families, you really help the rest of the team develop that individualized care. So if you were coming to care for me, you know, the care you would give Lynn Flanagan would not be the same care that you would even give Scott Flanagan. So we really can get down to what's important to that individual, what does this individual and this family need, and then when you go to the next home, it's what that family needs. And I just can't emphasize that enough, and really want our community to know that it is we're coming from a place that the patient is in charge, if you want to look at it that way, but everything we do should be in support of what goals the patient has and the family has. So as we kind of wrap this up, if you just had one or two things that you would want to tell the community about the support you all, your discipline in particular, provides as chaplains, or why that spiritual support is necessary, what would you say? It's an easy question, Hunter, come on.
Well, one thing I'd like people to know is that we have a lot of fun, and humor is also part of the ministry. And so whenever possible, when people have a sense of humor, they want to see the funny aspects of something that might be tragic, we go with them.
Yep.
Because that's part of what we do. It's not just reading scripture and prayer and sitting in some kind of really emotional heavy space. Sometimes what that patient needs is someone not to be serious, to hear their stories, to laugh at them, to help them find meaning through their full expression of their personality. And so that's when you look at the personal assessments that we do, that's part of it. And so a ministry that we would provide there is almost like a ministry of fun, a ministry of presence, a ministry of laughter, because we would know that that's really important for that individual to think about themselves, self-identity, self-awareness, and self-resolution.
You know.
That's beautiful. I love it.
And I love that because, in fact, I just not while I had a patient's wife say, "I haven't laughed in a long time," and I said something that made her laugh, and I needed that. I needed that. And what we try to do is supply some out-of-the-box things as well. I remember a patient a couple of years ago that wanted to go skydiving. He only had a week or so to live, and he wanted to go skydiving. And naturally, he couldn't do it physically. So we got a VR machine where he could put it on and simulate skydiving. And it fulfilled him. He died about a few days later, but he had that fulfillment of that last wish that he had. And we're there for that as well. If we can supply a out of the box dream, and there's a way we can do it, we do that. We try to find resources that will do that, because we want that last want to be fulfilled. And so we look for ways that we can do it, and it's not just spiritually, but also those deep needs of fulfillment that they want. And we try to help explain to people what the patient may be hanging on to, and try to bring them into resolution that the patient can go peacefully, and that the family can also find that peace to let the patient go. And so we're there not only to be the preacher, if you will, but also to be one that just sit with them and be a friend. And the comedian, if we have to be, but just we're absolutely there.
Yep. And so, you know, that I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is so much a part of people. We can't talk about taking care of the whole person without that whole personality. And that is one thing that we always want the community to understand, that just because we're looking at serious illness care, or maybe we are looking at hospice care, doesn't mean that it is all dark and gloom. There's so much hope to be found in this stage of our life. And you know, our mission, of course, is to be a supportive presence for life's journey, and we're there for the whole thing. But the laughter and finding meaning, all of that wrapped up, it just makes this the most beautiful work that I can imagine. And I am just grateful that you all are part of it with me.
It's a privilege just to be here. I mean, it's not a platitude. When I came here and I saw that we take care of people like family, and that was a true commitment, that just wasn't words on a page. Yeah. And then when I found out that you had a wicked sense of humor, and so do I felt
we were fast friends.
My goodness, I think this might work.
Oh my goodness!
I just thought y'all were wicked, but
well, you know, put the sense of humor behind it. Put the sense of humor. Oh, thank you all so much. I have the utmost admiration and respect for both of you, and for you as human beings, and my coworkers certainly. But I'm just so grateful for what you bring to the table, and it's so beneficial for every patient that you serve.
I don't want us to leave without blowing a horn.
All right.
Being the only 5-star in this area keeps me coming every day. Also being in the top 10 in the nation in healthcare as an employer gives me reason to want to stay here. And so I don't want to leave without blowing our own horn, knowing that out of 24 measures, we reached 24 of them, and spiritual care has been one of the leading of those 24. So it makes you feel like you're making a difference when the survey says spiritual support made me feel like I would support it. So it's a good feeling to know that we make a difference. Wouldn't you say that, huh?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It just brings people a more sense of security and comfort.
Yes.
It absolutely does. It does indeed.
Yes.
Well, thank you both so much. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Compassionate Conversations. If you ever want to learn more about Hospice of Rockingham County, you can call us at 336-427-9022. If there's ever a topic that you would like us to cover, a question you would like us to answer here on Compassionate Conversations, you can shoot us an email at www.DMin www.hospiceofrockinghamcounty.com.